Hi, everyone. Thanks a ton for giving me this opportunity to present in front of such an amazing audience. I came in for lunch and I was just kind of blown away by everyone here. I wanted to give you, my name's Madhu, Shalini, Iver. I come from an extremely sort of a deep technology background, and I'll walk you through my journey. It's not a very technical talk, but I'm happy to sort of stay back and answer any technical questions or anything that I might not have really thought about as I put this talk together with sort of the audience in mind. And so I had a lot of questions about the kind of audience that we would have and, the interests. And it seems like it's as varied an audience as it gets. So with that in mind, I'll get into my talk, which is really building building billion-dollar startups using deep technology, which I've done some of. So I wanted to just put my journey up here, which is I've been an engineer. That's my training, and I've also sort of now become an investor, a technology investor, a VC investor. It also kind of spans different geographies. I was born in India, but I was really brought up in Southeast Asia. I grew up in Singapore, which I'll come back to later. It has a lot of sort of grounding in my career later on. And then I went to university in Sydney, the University of Sydney, which is where I did my engineering. And then I moved to the United States about 20 years ago to the Valley. And I've been an investor and operator in both these geographies. So, what is really deep technology? It's a very subjective word that people use all over the place nowadays. And deep technology is grouping companies really that use cutting edge technologies to solve problems and to solve complex problems at times. These technologies really are artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, computer vision, so on and so forth. I don't really need to get into all of it, but and these technologies now are even used for B2C and both B2B, both. And B2C is obviously, businesses that are consumer facing. B2B is businesses that are, for other businesses. And I invest in this and I've built stuff in this. So my journey, I was a computer engineer and I got into, computational statistics, which is, my master's was in computational statistics. It's really applied mathematics, and it's starting to look at, all the different realms and verticals in which statistics touches. And I was at an engineering and scientific think tank in Menlo Park called Exponent. It's a public company. It really was started by a bunch of Stanford PhDs, and I was in the statistics and data sciences practice. And I did that for a number of years. So there were 700 consultants and over, most of them PhDs, and 90 plus disciplines, out of which statistics and data sciences touched almost every single discipline: pharmacology, biochemistry, mechanical engineering, technology development. You can see that we worked with in the Iraq war as well, where there were drone technology, and we needed to really figure out sort of how do we use data science to build drones that are going to be more effective, and computer vision and things. So we're doing this in the early 2000s to give you sort of a sense of how long ago we started in this big data journey. And accident collisions, products, Dell computers, Apple. I kind of worked with everybody in the early 2000s. And the first iPhone cracks came to us. So iPhones were cracking and the glass was not strong. At what point is the glass sort of breaking? These are all statistical questions, and they've just kind of expanded into many more things. So really 15 plus years of tracking AI and big data problems. When you look at it, these are all the methodologies, and it's just kind of rapidly grown. You had Oracle, you had SAS and SQL, you then just kind of went to NetEaser and Teradata to capture and store the data. The data just exploded. And then you had many, many other things that, we are trying to sort of see what are the kinds of tools that can manage the amount of data that's imploding and exploding. And what are the kinds of visualization tools that we have today as things have progressed from Excel spreadsheets to, AWS and, Google Cloud Platform and Azure, Microsoft Azure. And then, of course, the methodologies have always but stayed the same. It's been regression, it's been clustering, classification, NLP, neural networks, deep learning, and other things. And I've kind of had the rare opportunity to work in all of these over these last 20 years or so. It's been a good field to work in because of the number of problems that I've seen and the number of different changing technologies. I'll pause here and say that as a woman, I felt like, I've never been able to play the woman card before because, we've all sort of been, because there were too many men who controlled this area. And I think that one of the only ways to sustain in this kind of an environment was just to be sort of hyper competitive. Was to be convinced completely of what you're doing, and was to also just kind of constantly keep learning. In the late 2000s, as we were doing all this, something happened. So the learning piece was I used to present at joint statistical meetings, peer-reviewed journals and publications. And then I met some friends at, I had people from Google and LinkedIn and friends of mine that were working there. And Clive Humby, of course, came up with the quote that data is a new oil. This happened in the late 2000s. And, I started getting calls from a lot of people around the valley saying, hey, can you come and help us build products and build different businesses now that are using data that are completely technology oriented. Which is when I then moved over to a company called Intuit, which makes TurboTax, which makes QuickBooks. It's in Mountain View, California, and I was one of their first R&D data scientists in the data science group. They wanted us to look at how do people use TurboTax. When you look into TurboTax, what are the kinds of ways that we can help customers and consumers really get their taxes filled and get out. And that was a data science problem. It's funny, you would never think of somebody doing their taxes as a data science problem, but it's a classic product data science problem because you log in and different people get stuck in different directions. And I actually was measuring the amount of time somebody spends on a certain question. And that, and so we are recording the times, we are recording your clicks, we are recording the activity so that so that the product can learn and it can throw back stuff at you, and that's reinforcement learning. And that's around when, within about 8 months, it became very clear that there could be a huge amount of growth, huge amount of customer retention, customer uptake, customer cross-sell as you use data science. And so they wanted me to join and be a founder of something called QuickBooks Financing. Intuit also produces QuickBooks. And part of QuickBooks is small businesses. It has about 80% of small businesses in the US are QuickBooks customers. It was a staggering number. And we really needed to have financial inclusion because two big problems for small businesses were financial working capital and more customers. And working capital, we felt like no small business should really be judged on their FICO score, their individual FICO score, but their company's performance, which was the sort of core behind QuickBooks Financing. The thesis was, let's really help us get our businesses that are entering their books on our system, get them funded and get them working capital. So, it was, we'll help you identify who you should work with. Intuit didn't want to get into the lending business themselves. And so they obviously wanted somebody to sort of found something and form strategic partnerships, which is when I kind of went from an engineer to data scientist and a consultant to someone who started building strategic partnerships with NBFIs, which is non-banking financial institutions. They were just coming up then in the late 2009-10, which was Lending Club, On Deck, and a plethora of other peer-to-peer lending places, and Wells Fargo and Capital One and all of that. So we went to them with the data. There was also now there's a lot of talk about data policy, data privacy. We couldn't share our data with anybody, because these are our customers, they are our paying customers. Intuit has an extremely high moral and ethical responsibility. They take it very seriously. I love them because of that, because I love working for a company that actually cares. And so, my responsibility at the time was to not just head the data science group and the engineering group and the strategy group, but it was also to make sure that the data was protected. And so I had to talk to a lot of, the government folks that wanted to kind of, what is the governance that you guys are doing? What's the corporate governance like? What is your sharing policies? What's the black box that you're going to sort of have so that you don't share the data with Wells Fargo? You don't share the data with OnDeck. But then OnDeck and Wells Fargo can still lend and make these decisions. And so, really then it was, hey, let's find the right partners, let's make a platform, let's get the right rates, and let's make sure that our customers are completely protected but are still getting very easily applicable, because we need to make it easy for them as well. So it's a complex problem, which was solved, and we financed $300 million on the platform within a year and a half. Of us starting this, initiative. It was me and a product manager, and it was a great success story. We applied for some patents, we got it. So data strategy, it was all a product that was driven by data strategy. There was credit score using the QuickBooks data. There was a match algorithm to sort of say who's the right partner for the right customer. And then there was the marketing, because as you need, there's a point of need marketing that goes out to every customer that needs it. And by the way, that same marketing goes out to the strategic partners that are ready to fund. So really enabling that entire ecosystem. Got a couple patents, still many pending, and getting closer to getting patented. And then there was a scale. So we first built and then we scaled. And I think the big success came within 2.5 years when Intuit decided to fund really $100 million on its own balance sheets. And I think that was a really difficult journey. And I think data was really at the core, because we had the data. That was our only differentiation. We had some money, but it's a different kind of money. It's not really for lending. But we got into the lending business because we kind of felt really passionate about what we could provide to our businesses, the small business QuickBooks users, and the fact that we were going to be able to sort of help them better if we could have more control of the data. By the way, I speak a lot about the control of the data because now this is an extremely prevalent topic. I'm also part of the World Economic Forum Chief Data Officers group, and there is a ton of questions around use of data, sharing this data across different social platforms, B2B businesses sort of like owning your data. So who owns the data? Who's monetizing the data? What are they giving away? What do companies share? Of course, we all know Facebook and everything else and the problems there have been. So these are problems that, I've always kind of kept a close tab on as I've built large businesses and large data-driven businesses. Funnily enough, I think one thing led to the next, and I got a call from some people so back to my journey to Southeast Asia. I got a call from some people that worked back in Southeast Asia, 2014. There was an explosion there of startups. And one of the investors who had a $150 million fund who used to head Merrill Lynch called me and said, it was STEM Financial, can you please come, and you just need to get into funding and become an operating partner. An operating partner is an extremely different concept to an investment partner. I was both. How do you do due diligence? How do you build businesses? How do you sort of build startups and invest in them when you're not part of them? And my core journey really was to sort of say, hey, I'm going to come and build your product and scale it, and we're also going to be investing. So I did that across, I was based in Singapore, worked in Hong Kong, flew to Philippines, to Malaysia, to all the emerging markets really, to Singapore and other places. That led me then to the journey of becoming involved with a company called Gojek. Gojek is, for many people here who might not know it, it's the Uber of Indonesia. They started in 2014 and there were not many people then. I joined them in 2016. And between 2016 and 2017, when I was there, it became a $5 billion unicorn. The data science and analytics platform played a really pivotal role in solving the problems there and scaling it. It's Indonesia's on-demand mobile platform. There is Go Ride, which is a mobike or a motorcycle. Because of Indonesia's traffic, you need that kind of a service. And there's Go Car, much like Uber. You had logistics and courier and the courier companies that was Go Send. And Go Box, and then you had a plethora of other services like Uber Eats, which is Go Food, movie tickets, shopping carts, which was Go Mart, massages, everything, glam services. We used to have like people fly, go out to people's houses to do massages and to do like facials and hairstyles and everything. And it was really my responsibility to make sure that each transaction took place. At the height of the way we scaled the data, we had 1.2 million transactions per day in Indonesia. And that just meant that the data just exploded. We had a lot of data coming in and systems were breaking. Allocation was not completed because, you would order something and it doesn't come to your house. So I was responsible for every single order that came in. First of all, it has to come in. That's my responsibility as a chief technology person. It has to be fulfilled. I have to record the data. I have to make sure that the pricing is done right. It was a lot of responsibility, and so we grew from a small group of about 300, 400 people to more than 1,200 people, and so I had plenty of people to manage as well. So lots of different challenges, marketing, product, everything. And then I actually had to build, just for my own sanity, I built GoPay, which was a payments product because, I said, look, I can't do this when banks are failing, transactions are failing, credit cards are failing. So I went and did the GoPay product myself. And within 3 days of launching it, we had more transactions than the Bank of Indonesia. And so that was also something that was phenomenal success. And I actually, because of Intuit and because of the Valley exposure, I felt like I was able to scale something so quickly there. And Indonesia is actually not a small country. It's 150 million people. Jakarta is the capital, and it's extremely crowded. We were not just in Jakarta, but we were in Bali, which was a great offshoot because all our board meetings happened there. And and I could take I have some fantastic memories of some of the best vacations I've taken along with work at Bali. But it's not a small population. We wanted to grow out to Singapore, to Malaysia, which we did, Vietnam. And so it was really a sizable operation. I built Gojek's Singapore office and the first data team. So this is how the office looked like. So I don't know, I used to deal with the Economic Development Board of Singapore. I guess the journey that I'm trying to share is that, you start off as an engineer and a data scientist, and then you build something. But then you kind of, when you're in a startup, you do everything. Because I had to build an office. I'm not an interior design expert at all. So, this office, I don't know, I had a lot of help, but I felt like everybody sort of came to me to say, tell us what will look the best. And, that was a very funny experience for me, but dealing with the government of Singapore, trying to get this office open, dealing with the government of Indonesia, it was just a lot of sort of changing roles and playing different roles all the time. I just wanted to get into it a little bit to say why the overall data strategy was so important, because when you really look at these problems, each of these has real-time data is flowing in. It's not just data that I can store. It's dynamic. It has to be instantaneous. It requires different kinds of systems. It requires different kind of talent. There was nobody in Southeast Asia that I could employ that was, that was a Valley standard. That was another problem. And so how do you really build a team that can scale up to this kind of a transformation? You can't. And some of the code I wrote myself then. So it's again rolling back your sleeves, rolling up your sleeve and saying, hey, I need to write this, and then forming partnerships with universities to really just recruit talent. That was a huge problem of mine. Nobody could solve it. We had raised And then I went and raised, so we went and raised $555 million, which is $500 million. We did recruiting, but we just couldn't find the talent. Building talent, getting people back from the valley, some friends of mine that I just made them, sort of like arm twisted them to move back to Southeast Asia. Customer experience, retention of drivers because drivers were dropping out. And then there's a supply chain optimization problem as well that I had to sort of think about. And so these are, and then at the end of it, you need to also measure and track all these metrics to build new products, to perform better, to improve the product. So data and so machine learning and big data and AI is really at the root of a lot of things, and it's really at the root of building and growing businesses. And then finally, driving hypergrowth. Because your growth and optimization problems, what Gojek was and then what Gojek became after it just had like 500 of us. It's huge. You have surge pricing in Uber today. It's not a trivial problem because how each price that it shows in peak times is different to price that it shows. So it's dynamic pricing. And so that's, surge pricing and automated pricing is a huge deal. And it really is, revenue driver, huge revenue driver. You can't also have a siloed platform. You need to have a unified platform so that a person who's using food, Uber Eats, they're very, very carefully tracking people. I know that I tracked everybody who came into the platform, who used Uber Eats, who used GoFood, who used the ticket apps, who used GoPay, how much did you use? Because this is all sort of it's you're on the platform. We don't want you to get out and we want to monetize you. And then of course there was fraud, and Indonesia and entire Asia was horrific for fraud, which is the reason I actually went out and built the GoPay product. Because the frauds on credit cards, they are not banked. 80% of the population is unbanked. There is cash. Drivers were, taking out cash. And frankly, the reason I titled my talk "Deep Technology Driving Billion-Dollar Startups," I feel like this was all kind of the technologist's problem. Hey, things are failing, fraud's happening. What can you do? How can you automate it? How can you pattern recognize it? How can you give us new products? So really underlying all this is, how do you kind of collect, store, access appropriate data and build better systems? I came back at that time, so I have two kids, two boys, and we wanted to come back home to Menlo Park, which is where I'm at right now. And I did a very small startup. I was the chief revenue officer of a startup called Ethos Lending. It was in San Francisco. It's a property technology startup. And what it is really is, it had a $2 billion warehouse to give consumer mortgages to people. So you go to buy a house, you want to get you want to get a mortgage. How do you really automate? How do you really sort of do an underwriting platform? So it's also lending, but it's consumer lending, it's consumer mortgage lending. I'll be completely honest, sometimes in life you need to just take some calls. And I said to the investors that there is no way that in the next 10 years, you're going to automate consumer mortgages. I can't automate a consumer mortgage because then I'll be looking at what ethnicity are you, where is if somebody lives in Piedmont, is a white male, they're probably going to have a higher, probability of getting, a mortgage which has got a better rate just because of their credit scores and whatnot. So we didn't want to get into that. We did write an underwriting platform to make it as unbiased as possible. But then what I did was I actually headed the B2C. They were going to lenders. We wanted to go directly to consumers. I built that entire platform, which was a marketing platform, and we lent about $65 million per month because of data science and because of just the B2C analytics that we built to be able to go directly to consumers with the mortgage offerings. And then finally, here's where I'm at. I did that, the company got acquired. I started getting a lot of calls from Southeast Asia. I got a lot of calls here in the Valley. And really what it was help us build businesses. Do due diligence. Can you invest? Can you sort of tell us if we are investing in the right technology companies? How can we capture Southeast Asian and other emerging markets? So I've put together a venture capital fund. It's my own fund. I've got offices in Singapore and offices here. And really what it is let's try and get some money. So B2B there, which is corporates in Southeast Asia, really require help. They don't have help. And they require deep technology help. There is a lot of talent here. There's a lot of companies here in the valley that never ever get exposed to that market. And so the first idea really was, let's invest in companies here and take it back to Southeast Asia. Or let's invest in companies here and let it grow, and then they will have not just back in Southeast Asia as to go and open it there, but they can have like customers there in Southeast Asia. So it's a $50 million fund that I've put together, and I primarily invest in US startups with some sort of a event in Southeast Asia if they want. Otherwise, that's fine. So it's a cross-border fund. It's called Digital SEA Ventures Southeast Asia. And it really is around digital transformation. And it's a $50 million fund dedicated to, beyond seed, because seed would be too small. Series A and beyond startups, primarily US-based, Boston and the Valley, and New York some. And my commitment is obviously, the knowledge transfer, co-investment opportunities that I could do with other funds. And like I said, based in both the Valley and Singapore. We invest in fintech, we invest in manufacturing, energy, real estate, and transportation, and many others. I'm getting a lot of calls about biotechnology. Biotech requires a lot of big data, requires deep technology, applications, computer vision, robotics, and so lots of calls. So this, I think it's going to become sector agnostic really quickly, because lots of deal flow, a lot of good people that can use the help. And again, like I said, I wanted to keep it really wide. I think one of my mantras has been that I've really invested in a lot of personal growth throughout my career. I think the one thing that's really kept me going has been looking at emerging technologies. I've got a couple patents out, many others pending. It's the first two are patents that I got in sort of figuring out who are creditworthy and who are not, using alternative data points. And this was in the late 2009s that we started the work. We filed it in 2014. We just got it. I've also contributed to the third one down is I've contributed to the Encyclopedia of Qualitative and Quantitative Risk, and it's a chapter contribution with Wiley, and that was really around how do you manage risks of consumer products. And I've looked at Apple phones and Dell computers and fires in Dell computers, which I'm still using, by the way. Lots of other things that I've we have looked at as managing risks of consumer products. And then publications, peer-reviewed journals, presentations in meetings, in joint statistical meetings, and so on and so forth. And finally, as I was getting out of ethos lending, blockchain was a thing. It still is a very big thing. I don't want to give out my personal opinions about crypto and blockchain, but I will say that I was really excited enough to look at it as an emerging technology. I basically wrote the technical white paper for an ICO. And we went on and raised $70 million in the heydays of ICO. So 2018 actually is when I did this. And it was for a company called job.com. And job.com is basically, it's a blockchain powered, recruitment platform. How do you kind of get people connected with jobs, job seekers connected with jobs? And there was a blockchain and an AI application to it. So I think blockchain was something that I really wanted to kind of look into and invest in, but I've not done that yet because I feel that it's a bit nascent and I'm still watching that space pretty closely. So really the takeaways, and this is my last slide, and I think there's plenty of time to just kind of have an open discussion, is, this is me at the top of Half Dome. I've always done what I've loved, and that's why the journey has been easy, and I've been able to sort of ascend. And it's all about the happiness. And one other thing that I've sort of said about what I love is that everybody's journey is unique and everybody has unique things about them. So, we should all kind of use our uniqueness to really drive change and innovation. And then be a lifelong student, which I think is, has been very important to me. And giving back, really. The two SVPs that I hired in Gojek were both women. They ran really large organizations. It was a time when Indonesia, I was the only board of directors that was a woman, the only CXO that was a woman. It's a country that's, Asia itself is sort of like a little, it's progressive, but there are not many women at the table, and that's true for everywhere. But I think giving back is really important. And so I've always so before help other women was a thing, I really want to think that I've sort of embraced that and hired the right people for the job and not looked at any gender specifications and whatnot. And I think giving back to community as a whole is important, but giving back to women is extremely important. And I'll end my talk there and just open it up to all kinds of questions. Yeah.
There aren't many women in venture capital, and you were a pioneer, but what type of challenges do you encounter, or basically how did you raise a $50 million fund?
So full disclosure, I've not yet raised the $50 million fund. I've raised half of it. And
still pretty good.
Yeah, and so I'm doing SPVs and making some investments. I think it's been challenging, to say the least, because this has become a much more better time, really, with the Me Too movement and whatnot, but I think the challenges have not gone. It's still there. I think there's many more platforms, like All Raise is a very powerful platform, and there are some great women investors, but I think it's just challenging for everybody, and I'm not going to pretend that it's simple. Yeah. Thank you.
How old are your children now?
Oh, they're 7 and 5. And I actually did most of my things as my children were getting. So one of my engineers drove me to the hospital as I was having a baby. So
I'm just sort of here with my job, just going, how is it possible you could have done all that? I just can't even believe it. It's like, what? You did what? You did, it's just phenomenal.
Thank you so much.
That is just a lot. Yeah. So, and just all that I guess I'm kind of curious what the biggest obstacles were in Indonesia, and when you were there starting those startups, what was the biggest problem?
I think frankly, for me. And I'd lived in Singapore, in Australia, and in America for 15 years before I went back for a few years there. One of the biggest problems really was just the culture. It's the language barrier. It was Bahasa Indonesian. People spoke English, but still, it was the culture. It was the language barrier. It was also the lack of talent, and they wanted to kind of grow. And this is USD, by the way. The $5 billion valuation is USD. We raised $500 million, that's USD. So they're scaling a business as an international, and it's a decacorn now. It's valued at more than $10 billion. Google has invested, Alibaba, Tencent. Scaling that kind of a business and building that kind of a business without any talent, with sort of systems that are archaic. It was a lot of work that, it kind of took me back to my early days of like having to code things myself, having to be really, really, so those were very big. So talent and the culture, and sort of like managing both at times. I was too busy to even notice my gender, but honestly, and I think everybody else was too. So that was a on the positive side. Never a question.
Culture, is there more corruption abroad or here? Is it the same? Do we, fraud?
So the fraud was bad. So that's why I pointed it out. It's bad even here, but the scale of fraud there is much more. The government is tougher. Things take longer. But I think on the flip side, for technology, they don't have that much of. They don't really know. So GDPR. which is getting caught up here now with the data, the Data Act. They didn't really know how to control the data flow, and it was all new to them. So on the flip side, that was actually an advantage, that part of it, yeah. So I could build whatever I wanted, and the questions came later.
So how big was the team that from like setting doing the company structure?
Yeah.
From the founding team to go to market and
Yeah.
to scale.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are some of the key difference in the personnel change, right? And then different market, do you find it that you report to the head of the team?
Yeah, totally. I think the founding team, it was 2014, there were about 2 of them. They grew it, and the drivers, so there's different kinds of, just imagine an Uber or a Lyft. There are different kinds of personnel. There is the technology people who are building the platform, who are making sure that the optimization happens, the pricing happens properly, fraud is regulated. So there's a deep technology team. There's a product team that's building each of the products. So those were the kinds of people that I saw, that I built, and that scaled up from a few people to hundreds to thousands. And then there is the operationally heavy side, which is all the drivers, all the people that are providing the services, the restaurants, our partners. That ecosystem also kind of grew really quickly. And so and I think it's a great question, because from 2014 to 2017 or so, it was just an explosion from 2 people to hundreds to thousands to very, very high thousands. Yeah.
So did you join the team and there were 2 potential?
No, I did not join the team when there were 2. I joined the team when there were about a couple hundred people. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And they required somebody to build the entire technology part of it, and the product and the data science, which is why I came in. And therefore I saw I always was sort of siloed from the recruit thousands of drivers that are going to drive these people. That was not me. Build strategic partnerships with restaurants. I didn't understand Bahasa, whatever, so that was also not me. But then the entire technology stack, product, what are we building, what are we offering? So it's a very odd role to play, because you're building a product for a community, but you can't be divorced from that community, because you have to understand them, what they want, what they like. So it's kind of, this middle ground that you need to take.
Did you find running the cloud? Oh, sorry. Did you find running the cloud infrastructure in Asia was different than here? And is it cost just as astronomical as here, or is it a little different?
No, the cloud, it's all the same. A GCP, Google Cloud Platform, doesn't offer any discounts. It's like an Apple computer. You can go and buy it anywhere. It's the same. So the costs were the same. The talent was obviously different. We paid lesser, but there was no talent at that time. To be fair, there's a lot more now being done to develop that talent, but it's still very nascent. Yeah.
I feel like there are a lot of books about women trying to figure out this quote unquote work-life balance. And it's like lean in, lean out, all these different things that I talk about with my friends. And so did you ever feel like you struggled with work-life balance? Yeah. And if you did, how did you handle that?
Yeah, I think frankly, like there are lots of romantic answers to give, but my work-life balance has definitely doesn't fall in the romantic category of answers. It's just I've had a very tough time. I'm a mother of 2 children, and I had 2 children during the time I was doing all this. I feel like I hope I don't feel sad later on when I'm older and say that, hey, what have I done, but of course I tried to spend as much time with them. By the way, I think that's one of the big differences between here and Asia, is that in Asia there are nannies that are stay-at-home nannies. There's like a huge amount of support system, and some of the Chinese women who have built billion-dollar businesses have gone on record to say that there's just a lot more help for a lot cheaper, and it's government controlled, and you don't need to be worried, and you pay money, but it's it's still nice. So I could do some of that because of the help in Asia that I got. But I've also done it here at Intuit and then at Ethos Lending with this venture capital fund. So I feel like, I've not been completely, I've not been able to take the complete advantage of just being in Asia. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. And, frankly, like, I think Lean In is a great book, and I really am inspired by both Debbie and Cheryl. But I think that, women leaders in particular need to do a lot more with pregnant women giving birth, after birth, leave programs. It shouldn't be a decision between being a mother and being a successful woman entrepreneur, or and unfortunately we just don't have answers for that, and everybody feels that, oh, you're a woman, you should just be biologically ready to have a kid, and then you can do a million things, and you're a multitasker. And I really don't think that's leaning in. I think it's sort of like being a little like completely leaning yourself out of everything, of your health, of your mental balance, right. Which I don't think the longitudinal effects, this is the statistician in me talking, the longitudinal effects of that, there have been no studies, and I don't think, so no, my work-life balance has suffered, big time, yeah. I have suffered,
What
yeah.
about now though? Like, how about moving forward?
Yeah.
Is there like, do you have a strategy to kind of have some fun?
Yes, I am. I mean, as I grow older, I feel like I don't want to miss out on life, and yeah.
Yeah, it's very subjective. Like, what are you
Objective,
missing out?
totally. Yeah, what are you missing out? And, other things. Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the